At his 60th birthday party, the father raised his head high and said, "I'm proud of all my kids, except that failure over there." No one expected the so-called failure to stand up and silence the entire room. Want to know who that kid really was? Stick around to hear the whole story. Carter lived in Portland. A small studio apartment, full of light, no TV, nothing extra. Everything in it was chosen by him, placed by his own hands. 29 years old, single, debt-free, supporting himself as an interior designer, a job that most of his family still called some artsy delusion. Gregory, his father on paper, was a whole different story. 60 years old, a Boston-born businessman, owner of a sports equipment chain spread across the Northeast. He built the family the same way he built his brand. Consistent, marketable, something you could show off. By that logic, the two kids he always introduced to guests were Blake, the eldest, and Melissa, the youngest. Blake was the CEO of a logistics company expanding westward. Melissa was an OB/GYN, married to a lawyer, and had just had her first baby. Everything about them was polished, straightforward, and easy to spin into a successful parenting story. And Carter? He's living somewhere, West Coast, doing some artsy design thing. That was all Gregory ever said about him at family gatherings. Not wrong, but not right either. Carter couldn't remember the last time his father asked, "What are you up to?" Maybe when he was 19, before he decided to leave the state, get out from under their shadow. Maybe never. The family got together a few times a year. Always a production. Wine, catering, projectors, speeches. Gregory always wore a suit. Blake always brought a new girlfriend. Melissa always smiled gracefully and helped their mom set the table. And Carter, when he showed up, felt like someone who'd wandered into the wrong house. He tried once, years ago. Brought his first design sketches, hoping to share. But he barely opened his laptop before getting cut off by Blake's story about closing a funding round. The next year, he gifted his mom a custom-made ceramic lamp. It ended up off to the side, buried under boxes from name-brand stores. One year, he didn't come at all. No one called to ask why. Gregory didn't hate Carter. He didn't insult him. Didn't yell. He just left him out of the frame. When standing before a crowd saying, "I'm so proud of my children," he looked at Blake and Melissa. When raising a toast and saying, "My family is the future," he didn't glance Carter's way. When introducing his kids to business partners, Blake is expanding west. Melissa just had her first child. That was it. No third name. Each time, Carter just stood there, watching the scene like a lighting tech for a stage he'd never be on. Every now and then, his mother, Linda, would come over, lightly touch his arm and whisper, "You're special in your own way." It sounded comforting at first, but over time, hearing it again and again, it started to carry a certain taste, like she kept repeating it just to convince herself it was true. Carter grew up in a red brick 3-story house just outside Boston. He remembered the living room bookshelf clearly. Each kid had their own shelf for trophies and personal photos. Blake's was packed with medals and certificates. Melissa's had photos of her volunteering at a summer medical program. Carter's shelf used to hold a wooden house model he built by hand in 8th grade. One day, it was replaced with a framed family photo from Gregory's new store launch party. Carter wasn't in it. He was away at summer camp that year. At every gathering, Carter felt like he was walking into a family catalog, one he wasn't printed in. He didn't sit at the main table. He wasn't mentioned by name. Even when he brought wine from Oregon, the kind he knew his father liked, Gregory took a sip, nodded, and said, "It's all right." Then turned to Blake. "You still in touch with that French supplier?" And the strangest thing was, Carter wasn't angry. He wasn't. Not like when he was younger. Not hurt, just separate. Like a pane of glass quietly removed from a window frame, not cracked, not shattered, just no longer part of it. He got used to being overlooked. So much so that once, when someone called his name from behind in a grocery store, he didn't turn around. His first reflex was always, "That's probably not for me." Gregory didn't need to yell to push Carter out of the family circle. All he had to do was stay silent, decide who to look at, and let the rest fall away on its own. And somewhere in the quiet of Portland, Carter had learned how to stand tall without anyone looking his way. He didn't win, didn't lose either. He was just someone who was never counted as family, but still kept going. Like a photo that never got framed, but never faded either. A few weeks after the last family gathering, Carter was lying on his living room floor, sunlight from the window cutting across his face like a warm blade. He was messing around on his phone, swiping past a bunch of random ads when he stopped on one for a gene testing app. Find out where you belong on the map of human ancestry. All it took was a saliva sample, send it in, get results in 3 weeks. He didn't think much of it. Just a game. Another way to explore himself. He'd never really felt like he belonged anywhere, so trying once wouldn't hurt. 3 weeks later, an email said his results were ready. He opened it while sipping water, the screen lagging from a weak signal. The first line appeared, "No match found with relatives linked to the Gregory Matthews profile." He stared at that sentence for a long time. No sharp reaction, no shock, no pain, just made sense. It was like the final puzzle piece had clicked into place, and suddenly the whole picture was clear in a way that chilled him. All the scattered details fell into line. Gregory had never said Carter wasn't his, but now Carter was sure, he knew, and he chose to stay silent. Like always, Carter remembered being 17, having dinner with the family and a strategic partner from Denver. Gregory talked about Blake, the heir to the business, then Melissa, the promising daughter. When the man asked, "And the youngest?" Gregory just shrugged. That one's not really cut out for business. No name, no intro. Carter had felt a lump in his throat back then. Now he got it. Gregory had taken him out of the equation a long time ago. His mother, Linda, was the same. Always sweet, always there when he needed her. But she never quite looked him in the eye when she said, "You're part of this family." As a kid, Carter thought it was gentleness. Now he saw it for what it was, avoidance. A quiet kind of survival. Since high school, he'd noticed the difference. Gregory taught Blake how to speak to a crowd, how to make fast decisions. He connected Melissa with medical circles starting her freshman year. And Carter? Gregory never told him what to do. Never asked what he planned to do. When Carter chose design as a major, no one stopped him, but no one cared either. He used to think his father was just too busy. Later, he realized Gregory was busy with the 2 children he actually saw as his. Carter didn't get angry. He just accepted it. Like finding out the house you grew up in never had your name on the deed. You don't storm out right away, you just start walking through the door differently. Looking back, Carter saw it had all been consistent. Gregory didn't hate him. He just didn't see him. And now Carter understood why. Because Gregory never saw him as his. Biologically, that was true. But what chilled Carter wasn't the genetics. It was the fact that he'd lived his whole life inside someone else's home, and no one had ever bothered to confirm he was really there. He didn't talk to his mother about the test results. No email, no questions. He didn't need confirmation anymore. Like a wall that's already cracked, you don't need to ask who laid the wrong brick. You just let the cracks stay. No patching, no covering. Just a reminder of the structure you came from. The feeling of being cut out of the family picture now had a name, a reason, a weight. But he didn't need a frame anymore. Didn't need someone to hang him up. He was a design all his own. And the fracture in that blueprint was the detail that made it real. Since getting the test results, Carter didn't have many reasons to stay in touch with the family. Not out of anger. Just because everything that needed to be known was known. Everything that needed to be understood was. He lived lighter, truer, with fewer expectations. So when his mother called, her voice nearly catching, "Your father's throwing a 60th birthday party at the new lake house on Winnipesaukee. You should come." Carter paused for a few seconds. "I don't think I need to be there, Mom." On the other end, a long sigh filled the silence. If you don't come, people will say you hate him, that you don't belong in this family. That last part made Carter laugh. Not because it was wrong, but because it was the first time his mother had actually said out loud what everyone else had silently agreed on. After nearly half a minute of silence, he nodded. "All right, but I'm not going for him." She didn't respond. Just a soft, "Okay." Carter spent the night before getting ready. A pressed white shirt, dark khakis. The gift, a handcrafted wooden box finished with natural oil, holding a glass hourglass inside. Nothing expensive, but beautiful. And his iPad, just in case the night followed the same script it always did. The next day, he drove more than 3 hours to the lakefront estate. The sky was cold and damp, clouds hanging low over the water. The house appeared behind a line of pines, big, polished with a lawn trimmed like carpet. He didn't expect anyone to greet him, and no one did. Carter found parking on his own, carried the gift himself, and came in through the side path to avoid drawing attention. Inside, the house was packed. The sound of glasses clinking, pockets of laughter, the scent of high-end food. Melissa sat in the middle of a group of older guests, explaining tech stocks like she was live on CNBC. Blake stood by a massive screen, flipping through slides of the new penthouse he was investing in, San Francisco skyline glowing in the background. No one noticed Carter walk in. Not a single glance interrupted a story. He placed his gift box on the long table beside a pile of luxury brand bags, his present nearly swallowed by the shine of designer names. No one turned to ask where he'd come from. He passed by Gregory, still towering like a CEO presiding over a celebration. Gray suit, whiskey glass in hand, eyes scanning the room like he was picking stocks. He was laughing, talking about expanding the store chain into Maine. Carter wasn't seen. Or maybe he was seen, but not registered. Same difference. He poured himself a glass of wine, found a corner and sat down. No one asked what he wanted to eat. No one said, "So what are you up to these days?" Every conversation around him rotated around familiar buzzwords. IPOs, equity, blockchain, trusts, West Coast real estate. No one asked about interiors, design, art, or Portland. The city where Carter lived might as well have been off the edge of their mental map. Melissa spoke with pride about the new maternity wing her hospital was building. Gregory cut in, "Good. If you need someone to handle the finances, just let your dad know." Blake mentioned his company's new partnership with a firm in Japan. Gregory laughed. "That business gene clearly came from me." Carter sipped slowly. Second glass. His hands rested still on his lap. His eyes scanned the room like he was studying the architecture of a house, which were the load-bearing beams, which were ornamental, which walls blocked the light. He wasn't angry, wasn't sad. Just felt like someone behind a one-way mirror, watching a film whose ending he already knew. He didn't have a role in this party. No speech to give, no name to be mentioned. And this time, maybe he wasn't even planning to ask for a place in the frame. Carter stayed seated in the corner as the soft background music faded, replaced by the quiet buzz of a microphone coming to life. Gregory stood in the center of the room, his back straight like he was about to pitch to a boardroom. The chatter around the room softened, chairs subtly shifted toward the middle. Everyone knew what was coming, the host's speech, the main event of the night. Gregory adjusted his collar, raised his glass, and swept his gaze around the room. He started in a deep, measured voice. "I'm not someone who gives thanks easily. But today, I'm truly grateful to everyone here for walking alongside me and my family through this journey." Polite applause. He went on, "When I look at Blake standing there, a young man running a strong logistics company about to break into the Canadian market, that's the spirit of a trailblazer." Blake gave a modest nod, smiling as he shook hands with a few people nearby. "And then there's Melissa," Gregory continued. "Not just a doctor, but an incredible mother, a key part of this region's medical community. If I ever need care at the end of my life, she's the one I'd want standing beside me." Another round of applause broke out. Gregory glanced down at his glass, then looked back up. The room held a quiet pause, something expectant in the air. He hesitated, exhaled like he was weighing his next words. "And then there's one who's still doing his artsy thing." No one laughed. A few quiet throat clears. A couple of quick side glances. Carter's mother lowered her head, eyes fixed on her lap, hands tightly clasped. The air in the room didn't burst, it compressed. Not from noise, but from the weight of the silence that followed. Gregory took a sip of his drink and said nothing more about Carter. He turned, lifted his glass toward an old friend, and shifted the topic to opening a new branch in the suburbs. The room seemed to understand. That was the end of the speech. The hum of conversation returned, soft and cautious. Carter didn't move. No one looked his way. No one came over. He wasn't waiting. He didn't need anyone. But inside, something quietly locked into place. It wasn't the first time Gregory had done this, but it was the first time he'd done it in public, in front of friends, family, guests. The first time he'd confirmed something Carter had spent his whole life suspecting, questioning, trying desperately to unbelieve. He didn't flush, didn't clench his fists, didn't react, but every cell in his body felt compressed, as if in this perfectly lit, architecturally precise mansion he was the one flawed element, the misplaced piece, a stain that wouldn't wipe clean. No one stepped in to soften the blow. No one said, he's doing his own thing and he's doing all right. No one, because who even knew what he really did? And if they did, would they care? Carter set his wine glass down, quietly, like he didn't want to crack the air that already felt paper thin. Then he stood. Slowly. No excuse me. No goodbyes. No glances back. He walked straight toward the giant projector screen, positioned near the piano. Just as Blake wrapped up a short talk about the real estate market, Carter passed by him without a look. The room kept murmuring, but some heads began to turn. He opened his iPad, connected it to the projector wirelessly. His hands moved with practiced ease, steady, sure. His eyes didn't scan the room, but the room had gone still. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Glances shifted, first to the screen, then to Carter. For the first time all night. But he hadn't come to be seen. He came so someone would have to look. The screen blinked once, then settled. The first slide appeared, plain white background, a single line of text. Full site concept rendering. Lakeside Project NH-NAR 2708. No one understood it. A few people exchanged looks. Blake raised an eyebrow. Melissa stayed quiet. Carter stood still beside the projector table. His finger brushed the edge of the iPad and the slide changed. The screen shifted to a 3D rendering. A top-down perspective, the entire lake house laid out like a digital model. Glass walls facing the water, wide patio, sloped roof, pale wood mixed with raw cement, stone paths curving softly through the garden. No one laughed. No one spoke. Only the hum of the projector, and the glow of the screen casting light on Carter's cheekbones, as if he were stepping out of the design itself. This house, Carter said, his voice level, steady, was part of a visual concept job commissioned by the builders. They hired through a freelance platform. The designer stayed anonymous, just an ID and a project code. He tapped again. Next slide, a sectional view of the living room, glass walls, a corner cabinet, lighting that landed perfectly on the rug. The exact room they were standing in. I was the designer, Carter said. He paused, looked down for just a second, then went on. They didn't know. I didn't know where the project would end up. But when I saw the photo in the party invite, I recognized every detail, every brick, every slice of light. It was mine. Another slide clicked on. In the bottom right corner, designed by CM, Carter M, small, italic, like something etched beneath glass. The room went completely silent. No phones buzzing, no awkward laughs, no whispers, just the sound of Carter's own heartbeat and the weight of every pair of eyes now truly on him. Not with pity. Not like he was out of place, but like something had just shifted, and no one could pretend it hadn't. Carter didn't lock eyes with anyone. But somehow, they landed on Gregory. The man stood in the center, still holding his drink, but his posture had softened, just slightly slumped. He wasn't angry, he didn't speak, but his face looked like someone who'd just lost something he was once sure he owned. Carter's mother raised a hand to her mouth. She said nothing, but the tears came without stopping. Melissa didn't turn around. Blake exhaled, set his glass down. Carter stepped forward. I don't share your blood, he said, voice steady, even. I know that, and I think you've known it for a long time too. Gregory's brow tightened, lips parting slightly, as if a word had formed, something meant to stop what was coming. But nothing came out. You chose to keep that quiet, Carter continued, just like you chose not to see me, not to say my name, not to want me. He paused. I understand, and I don't blame you. He turned slightly toward the screen. The final slide appeared, a nighttime view of the house, its warm light spilling across the lake. But this house, he said slowly, clearly, has my fingerprints on every brick. The silence stretched, as if time itself had drawn in, holding its breath. Carter didn't wait for a response. That sentence wasn't meant to wound, wasn't meant to reclaim, wasn't meant to bring anyone down. It was just there to place a final period, exactly where it belonged. No flourish, no shouting, just clarity, like a blueprint line, inked in precision. He powered down the iPad. The screen blinked off into black. No one moved. No one repeated the words, still doing his artsy thing. Because now, they were all standing inside that very thing. And that thing had the name of the person they'd chosen to leave out. No one stopped him as Carter folded up the iPad. No wait, No one called his name. No hand reached out. The room stayed full, and somehow completely hollow. And through that hollow space, Carter walked out. He turned away, walked past the buffet table, past Gregory, past the ones who'd never even asked where he lived. No one reached out a hand. A few nodded, eyes searching for words they hadn't earned the right to say. Carter didn't respond. He hadn't come for validation. He came to say goodbye, without needing to speak the word. The heavy wooden door closed behind him, and the cold evening air swept across his face, clearing the last traces of whatever was left. Muted voices from inside still floated faintly, then faded. Carter stepped down the stone path, 10 steps at most, then a voice behind him, soft and trembling. "I'm sorry." Linda stood there, hair tossed by the wind, eyes wet, hands unsure of where to rest. She hurried over, wrapped her arms around him, tight as if letting go might make everything fall apart. "I should have told you. I should have." "No," Carter cut in. His voice was calm but final. He didn't look at her, just stared at the damp stone beneath his shoes. "You chose survival. I chose truth." Linda rested her head on her son's shoulder, her tears soaking into his shirt like it was the first time she'd cried in the right place. But Carter didn't stay to dry them. Gently, he unwrapped her arms from around him, gave a small nod, and turned away. He got into the car and shut the door. The engine turned over on the first press. Dashboard lights flared softly to life. The heater whispered on. He buckled in, opened the map, didn't pick the fastest route back to Portland, chose the long one, the road that curved around the lake. He wanted to drive through the pines. Just past the estate gate, his phone buzzed. The screen lit up. Gregory. Carter looked at it for exactly 1 second. Didn't answer. Didn't save the number. There was nothing left to say, and nothing left to hear. A minute later, 2 texts came in, back to back. From Blake, "You were out of line." From Melissa, "Finally said it." Carter didn't reply. He didn't need defense, didn't need judgment. Everyone had chosen their role in this play. He was just the only one who'd stepped off the stage. The tires rolled over damp pavement, flanked by towering pines, the wind slipping through them in long, sighing whistles, like the forest itself was exhaling. Behind him, the lake house shrank in the rearview mirror. Its warm lights dimmed, then dimmed again, until they were just a single fading ember in the cold woods. The house everyone believed belonged to Gregory, but Carter knew better. He knew the curves, the light, the lines. It had his fingerprints. He didn't feel triumphant. Didn't feel like he'd won. He just felt light. Everyone carries an invisible house inside them. Some people live in someone else's forever, never realizing they're just standing in the doorway. Carter had just stepped out of one. He wasn't fleeing. He was simply leaving. Hours later, as Portland rose ahead in the dark, city lights reflecting in his windshield, the first feeling that hit him was safe. Not because anyone was waiting, not because anyone would ask where he'd been, but because here, no one cared enough to ask, "Are you really part of that family?" He knew the answer. He never was. And in that truth, he was free. Some people live their whole lives under one roof and never truly feel like they belong. Not because they're lacking, but because they don't fit the mold someone else built. Carter didn't earn recognition, but he didn't need it to exist. Some truths, when spoken, aren't meant to change others. They're meant to set you free. If you knew you weren't truly accepted in your own family, would you keep trying to fit in, or would you walk away like Carter did? Share your thoughts below, and if you're into real, layered, sharp-edged family stories like this one, hit subscribe to Family Drama so you don't miss the next episode.